Welcome to Manu Forti Ministries presents Common Genius, Uncommon Destiny. I am your host, Reggie Key, and today my special guest is Tina Pearson. Tina, how you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
I am well as well. Thanks for asking, and thanks for being on the show today. I know that we haven't known each other for that long, but we saw some kingdom connections right away that I wanted to make sure to give you a chance to tell us what you're doing here. And you live in,
Blythewood, South Carolina.
yeah, and we'll just say in South Carolina. And just make sure that I ask you later on, because I don't want everything to be about what I'm doing and what my workshops are, my books. I want to know about your businesses, because I understand, especially for entrepreneurs, small business owners, that many times we are walking out what I'm calling genius. And sometimes it just takes somebody to put a positive label on what you're doing to kind of like get your shoulders up a little bit, like, oh, okay, like, I'm doing something that's genius. And so I already know that you believe that you're making contributions with the endeavors that you're doing, but I just want to, talk about the root of them a little deeper in a way that you might not have thought before. So is that cool?
That's cool.
All right. So, Tina, my first question for you is this. This starts every interview, and it pretty much ends every interview too, if I have to come back and see if your answer changed. But
Okay.
Tina, do you consider yourself to be a genius?
For a while, the answer was no. For a while, I did not consider myself to be a genius. For a while, I did not consider myself to be creative.
Mm-hmm.
For a while, I didn't consider myself to be much of anything, but that was because I had to learn who Tina was. And a few years ago, God actually told me that I had the mind of a genius. And I didn't really know what that meant when I got that word.
Uh-huh.
But as I continued walking in my journey with Christ and understanding, I am made in his image, and God
Yes.
himself is a genius. So if
Yes.
I'm made in his image and his
Yes.
thoughts are not my thoughts, but I can tap into some of those things that he does, then I am a genius.
Well, that was a great interview. You pretty much said everything that I wanted to say. There's nothing else to say. You have nailed so much of what this interview is and what it's meant to do. Many times I have to kind of gauge who I'm talking to and determine if I'm going to come from a faith-based perspective or from just not a worldly perspective, but kind of a generic sanitized version. And it's because I want to make sure that I don't want the person to feel like I am putting my faith on them. And so I knew, though, that you didn't hear, you weren't paying attention, but I either introduced these interviews as Inkwell Spoken Presents or Manu Forti Ministries Presents. And I knew this was going to be a ministry presentation. So I appreciate you setting the standard really quickly, right? So you said a lot of good things, and I tried not to, I wanted to jump out of my chair. I was trying to,
I saw that.
but one of the things that you said was, at first you didn't see yourself as a genius, but you had to discover who Tina was. And I love that, because when I talk to youth, what I tell them is, I'm like, look, and adults too, for that matter, I'm like, look, at the end of this, I want you to be able to, as readily as you know your name, I want you to be able to respond to genius. Like somebody says genius, you should be like, you speaking to me. Like you just said something to me, right? Because if somebody says Tina, like I know a couple Tinas, right? But if somebody says Tina Pearson and you don't look something, you've forgotten who you are. Even the scriptures talk about, a double-minded man, and how, a person the person who looks into a mirror and turns his head and forgets who they are, is because they've forgotten basically whose image and likeness they've been made in.
Right.
And so he said so much good stuff, and I want to make sure I don't forget. But I want to go back to be who you were when you were unsure or you didn't identify. I want to kind of get into why. But before I do, I want to touch on what I heard you say too. You said that the Lord spoke to you and said that you have the mind of a genius. And two scriptures came to mind when you said that. One of them is definitely in My book is two-sided. One side is, just like I said, it's just generic, it's for the marketplace, but the other side is faith-based. And the faith-based side doesn't just say, unlocking the genius within you. It says unlocking the mind of Christ within you. Because 1 Corinthians 2:16 says that we have the mind of Christ. And so I wanted to affirm you and what you said in that, because everything, it don't matter what I say, if it's not in the Bible, then we just talk, right? And so the second thing that you said that sparked me to go to this other scripture, and I can't remember the address, but it does say that God gives us witty inventions. And once we begin to understand that any good idea that we have is not ours, like God is giving us downloads. I mean, that's how we got medicine and mathematics into the world. We didn't discover anything. It wasn't like it's not like we made it up. It was revealed to us. All of the knowledge and wisdom that mankind has, whether they believe in God or not, is revealed to us by the Creator.
Right.
So I appreciate that you set that bar high real quick. But I wanted to make sure I noted that. So that being said, can you get into a little more of the mindset that you had before you were comfortable saying, like, I'm a genius? Like, why do you think that you didn't subscribe to this concept, this notion, this truth? You're a genius.
Well, like I said, I didn't know who I was for most of my life until the age of 28. I discovered who Tina was at the age of 28. And prior to that time, I was trying to be who everybody else wanted me to be. And I was striving to be Miss Perfect. And so, if I was around this person, they thought this way of me, I had to do everything to make sure that's how I was. Family, friends. I mean, it wasn't anything that they did intentionally, but I fed into that. And so I finally got to a point where I looked around and I was like, I don't even know who I am. Even in my relationship, I had gotten into a relationship when I was 18. And I just, because I had my whole life planned out. So I just knew he was going to be my husband. And so I did everything I could to be the woman that he wanted me to be. And when we ended up parting ways, I was like, wow, I don't even know who I am without him.
Right.
So I really had to take time and sit with the Lord and say, God, who am I? Who did you create me to be? I didn't even know my purpose. Like, I've always had a yearning and a passion to be a teacher, but I was never supposed to be a public education teacher, which is what I was. Okay. And so when I started sitting with God and letting him show me what he created me for, who he created me to be, who I am, that's when I started tapping into my purpose and walking into things that he has called me to walk into.
Well, amen.
Amen.
There's, what was I going to say to that? There's a powerful testimony that you have. In a little bit that I just heard, you have a powerful testimony for women, because so often some women do find themselves defining themselves by who they're with, whether it be, because you started out talking about, just family and friends, and then you even got to, this guy who you met at the age of 18. And so, I mean, we all do that, but it seems like because, a man shall find a wife, and it's a good thing, and then now you got to try and make sure that you have this pressure. Society put this pressure on you that, hey, if you got to be a certain way for especially Black women, you got to be a certain way for a man to be attracted to you and to want to marry you. And oftentimes that involves like suppressing your shine for theirs, instead of being behind every good man is a good woman. Like, it's so much garbage that both sides fall into, to be honest with you. Men fall into this belief that women are to be like this, and women fall into it as well. So if we all just remember that we are fearfully and wonderfully made in the eyes in the image and likeness of the Lord, and our soul knows it right well, then that begins to get us on the right course. So my second question, and I almost forgot this question because you're saying so much good stuff, Tina, is this. When you heard this word genius back in the day, and even now, who comes to mind? Or let me maybe phrase this a different way. I've been thinking about rephrasing this question. Who do you think comes to mind when most people hear this word genius?
Um, well, I'll go with the way you worded it first, and then I'll get to the second part. So when I thought about a genius, I remember, so I don't know if it was Oprah, what show it was on. There was this kid on there who was super smart. And it was like he knew everything at the age of, I don't know, 10. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's a genius. I'll never be that person.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I knew that I was smart, you know, and I might have even looked at some of my classmates as close to being a genius, but I never saw that in myself. But there's not one particular person that I could say that comes to mind. But as I grew and got older, got wiser, and grew closer to God, I realized my definition of genius was incorrect.
Yep.
Very incorrect.
Yep.
Because again, I'm created in God's image. God himself is a genius.
Yeah.
So why can't I be a genius? Why am I not considering myself a genius when I'm created in the image of the all, the one that created it all?
Yeah.
But God was never my first answer. Never.
I've only gotten a handful of people that have said Jesus, and sometimes I even think like, well, they know I'm a minister, so they're just trying to say the right thing. Like, I don't even know if they really believe it. They just saying it because they want to be right. Like this what you want me to say, right? Like, and this is so much of not that. And it's interesting because the points that you're raising is, you know, we model this idea of genius after another person, which means we're always trying to fit ourselves into what somebody else is or what we believe other people think that genius is. And so that's the problem, right? And identifying with God is not, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, the scriptures speak on it in several different ways and in several different addresses. And, you know, we're not trying to get into a Kanye West mentality where we're like, yeah, I'm a God, because his whole thing is completely it's on some stuff.
It's somewhere else.
It's somewhere else when he talks about that. But the person that most people identify, you ready for this name? Because you're gonna be like, oh yeah, I see that. The person that most people identify with, or at least when they think of genius, they think of this person is Albert Einstein.
Oh yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
And they do the same thing you did with this prodigy that you saw on Oprah. They'd be like, well, doggone it. He discovered everything. Like, I mean, not everything, but like E equals MC squared. I don't even think I know what the theory of relativity is. So if he's a genius and everybody has ascribed genius to him, you'll be like, well, yeah, he is a genius. But what we do is we disassociate it from ourselves in defining him as that.
Right.
Because we've convinced ourselves that genius is only that. And genius is about IQ, and genius is about academics, and genius is about, you know, GPA, all these different letterings and things like that. And that's only one type though. Like genius outside of the physics realm that Einstein found himself in. There's genius in the person who has a GPA that doesn't have a 3. It doesn't start with a 3 point whatever. There is genius to be found in every facet of human existence and human life. We just have to begin to separate and distinguish ourselves from who the world defines and most people define as that. So, and you've already been saying that like for the past 10. So I'm just quantifying it and making it like, you know, succinct. So check it. There's this quote that I love to say, and it purportedly comes from Einstein himself, which makes it kind of convenient, but you know, the interwebs be lying. So I don't know if it really comes from him, but we're going to attribute it to him for the purposes of this interview, right? So are you ready for this quote? You may have heard it. Let me know. I want you to let me know 2 things. 1, had you heard it before? And 2, how's it hit you? How do you internalize it? So you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. I'm feeling like what was that David Allen Greer's character in The Living Color? You remember that? Y'all can hear it. Here it goes. But here it is. If you judge a fish by how well it can climb a tree, it'll spend its entire life thinking it's stupid.
Ooh, never heard that.
Okay.
Never heard it. Never heard it. I was waiting. I thought you were about to say, if you judge a book by its cover. I'm like, I know you.
Like, anybody heard that? Like, who do you think I am? What planet do you think I grew up on? Thank you.
I was an English teacher. You know, I heard that.
This is different.
Yeah, that's good. Say it one more time, please.
If you judge a fish by how well it can climb a tree, it'll spend its entire life thinking it's stupid.
That's so deep.
It
That's
is.
so deep.
Tell me how it's deep though. How is it deep to you?
Because in reality, in the natural sense, you wouldn't see a fish climbing a tree.
Oh.
But why is it not possible?
Oh, you went a different way. Okay.
I'm just asking, why is it not possible? Like, who put those limits there?
Okay. That's interesting. Nobody, you are turning this thing. I did not expect you to go this way, but that's all right. Let's go there. You know what? Since you asked that question, in the back of my mind, I've kind of been waiting for somebody to say something in this vein, because technically there is a fish called a mud skipper that can live for prolonged times outside of water when the water is not plentiful in its environment, and it has adapted and mutated to almost have like lungs so that it can, but it's skipping around on land to find another water source. I'm not saying that I've seen them climb trees, but I definitely know of this type of fish. And so it kind of flies in the face of this quote, but yeah, continue. I just want to put that out there. Continue on your path. What are you getting at here?
Well, and when you said that quote, the first thing that came to mind was, if a man can survive in the belly of a fish, why do we put limits on things?
Oh, okay.
We serve a limitless God. And so we have to stop. I even had to I had to repent about several things. And one of the things was, God, I just want to live comfortably. I just want to have enough money to pay my bills, travel, and eat good.
Yeah.
But what if God says, I want to give you more, which he has?
Mm-hmm.
I limited him. I done cut off my own blessing for what I could see, just based on what I could see in the natural.
Okay.
So I think we have to stop limiting based on what we know to be true, just on what we've experienced in life as humans, because we serve a limitless God
who has experiences that we have yet to even know of or think of or dream or imagine. You know, how's the scripture go in Ephesians 3:20? And to him who is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all or think, according to the power that works in you, right?
Right.
So I like that. I've never had anyone go in this direction before. It's kind of derailing me a little bit, but it's cool because there's no limits, right?
No limits.
But traditionally, what this quote invokes is this idea that here's a fish that has been judged over, in my mind, this fish is getting judged over and over again, and it's been told how it should function, despite not knowing what it was designed to do. And this fish that is trying to climb this tree is not in its element. It's not in its lane, so to speak. And somebody has seen fit to say, hey, look, you should be climbing trees, and has failed to see, like, hey, have you looked at what this fish is? Do you live on planet Earth? Like, before, when you thought the quote was, if you judge a book by its cover, and you was like, I live on the planet Earth, right? Like, I've heard that before. But having lived on the planet Earth all of your life and all of my life, you know that typically fish belong in what?
Water.
And
Yeah.
water. They are
Mm-hmm.
streamlined. They have scales, they have gills.
Mm-hmm.
Everything about this fish is designed for it to and not just function, but thrive and succeed in water. And what we tend to do, speaking of the metaphor of this fish, we tend to judge people and we judge
Mm-hmm.
ourselves by an element that we're not even supposed to be in. And in doing so, our genius, like what happens if a fish stays out, mud skipper not included? What happens if you keep a fish out of water for too long?
It does.
It's going to die. And this is what I see around me, Tina. I see dying genius all around me because
Mm.
genius has been taken out of this element and put into something else that it wasn't meant for in people. And so my job, I feel, is to resuscitate, revitalize, and resurrect genius in people.
That's good.
Thank you.
That's good.
And this is, again, this is not anything that I can take credit for because it's something that God literally revealed to me one day. And I'm like, oh, snap. And it was revealed to me in three components and
Mm-hmm.
came from three sources, right? So the three components are this: passion, talent, and purpose. So if you can identify these three things, then you will unlock the genius that's on the inside of you.
That's so good.
It's really simple. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just a paradigm shift. It's just, okay, let's define this differently. Because I think you
Mm-hmm.
said early, we've been defining genius incorrectly. And it starts with just this understanding that there is something very unique and specific to who we are as individuals that is genius.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I want to go back really, really quickly to the scripture for 1 Corinthians 2:16 that talks about how we have the mind of Christ. One way that I help people internalize and understand that is we are the church, those of us who are born again believers, and another phrase that recognizes or identifies the church is the body of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
That if something has a body, then it has to have a head.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that Christ is the head of the church. And so just like biologically how the body works, every part of our bodies that moves and breathes and functions as it's supposed to interacts with and communicates with the head, the brain, right? So in
Mm-hmm.
many different respects, my little toe has a part of the brain that's specifically and uniquely designated for it. So my
Mm-hmm.
toe has the brain, it has access to this. And even as we're one body, many members, all of our membership in the body of Christ in the church has access to this mind of Christ. And so that's another way to say what you've already said. Like I have access to the genius mind of the creator of all things. So if I have access to it, then I have it. It's mine.
Exactly.
But we just have to be clear and careful to recognize that, like I said, my bad ideas are mine. The ones that don't function and don't operate. I have learned to attribute any good idea that I have. That's not mine. The Lord just gave that to me. Right.
Exactly.
And I can tell that you agree with that too. You have this identification because now it puts the ownership back in its proper perspective. And we're just stewards of whatever it is that he's revealing and giving us.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So I kind of feel like I've been talking too long. I'm gonna pause for a second. And what else is on your mind other than exactly? I've identified passion, talent, and purpose. How's that hitting
Um, Funny story. It's funny that you say that because, like I've said, I've always had a passion for teaching. I knew that I should be a teacher. I just didn't know that I should be in a public education classroom. And so, was it last year? Yeah, last year around this time, I think. I don't know. It's in my journal. God downloaded a course called "Obedience Leads to Prosperity."
you? Okay.
By the time the day was over, I had the entire syllabus done. And I was like, God, what is this? Like, I'm big on obedience. Like God said, it's time for you to leave the classroom and walk into full entrepreneurship. And I did that. Like, and it was not easy, but it was an act of faith and it was me walking in obedience. And so when he gave me this course, I launched it. And it was amazing, like amazing. The outcome I thought was going to be that everybody that took the course was going to be ready to launch whatever God had told them to launch, whether it be a book, a business, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But in actuality, what happened was God eliminated all excuses. So by the end of the course, no one had an excuse not to launch. And so from there, God said, okay, now I want you to be an obedience coach. And I was like, obedience coach? I was like, God, that's not even a thing. Like nobody's gonna do that. Sign up for my coaching program, because what is that? And so the next day, my business coach, she does a broadcast every Tuesday morning. And her guest on there, her name was Dream Coach Nikki. And God said, so I can make her a dream coach, but I can't make you an obedience coach.
Whoops.
And I was like, okay, God. And so from there, launched my coaching program, Obedience Leads to Prosperity. And I have a passion for people to walk in obedience.
Yeah.
To use the talents that God has given them to do the things that they have been called to do.
Oh, snap. Okay.
And that's genius.
That is genius.
Because I would have never in a million years called myself an obedience coach.
Right.
That's all God. That's an idea straight from heaven. But that's genius.
I agree. You're gonna see in a minute just how much I agree with you. So here's the thing. I'm gonna start this. So just like how I deconstructed this genius word and I reconstructed it, I'm gonna do the same thing with passion. Talent and purpose are pretty much self-explanatory. I don't have to do a lot of coaxing for people to understand talent and purpose, but passion, the way he gave me this equation is a little different. Mm-hmm. And so, like I said, he's given me pieces like a puzzle of this over time to the point where it's just manifesting into this cohesive workshop and book. So to give credit where credit is due, outside of God, this idea of the commonality of genius comes from this guy named Bruce George. He was behind Def Poetry Jam back in the day. I met him through that because I started writing poetry. And I reconnected with him a couple of years ago because I was like, Bruce up to something, man. I'm like, so I hit him up like, Bruce, what you doing, man? And he was like, look, I got this whole concept, this nationwide movement, this brand called Genius is Common. And we're trying to, take this word out of the hands of elite people where it's only certain people that have it and spread it amongst everybody. And I was like, dude, I'm on board. I was in Chicago at the time, the Chicagoland area. I said, what you need me to do? He was like, all I need you to do is I'm gonna license you to put this thing on a shirt and just get the message out. So that was one component. And then the Lord he had already lined up other components within me because I had read a book and I had based on workshops, some smaller workshops off of this book called The Assignment by Mike Murdoch. And the assignment, Tina, is really simple. It says, hey, look, if you want to figure out what your assignment is on this planet, he said, figure out what your Popeye moment is. And now I'm dating myself because, people don't know who Popeye is anymore.
I know who Popeye is.
Popeye's chicken, right? So there was a cartoon back in the day. Popeye was this, kind of muscle bound. He was muscle bound and scrawny at the same time. I don't know how that works, but he was this sailor. And he had the big arms and the skinny, anyways. And he was a sailor who had this girl named Olive Oil who was super skinny. And then he had this antagonist. He had his arch enemy, Bluto, who would steal Olive Oil and always just be an antagonist, messing up Popeye's whole life. And so in every cartoon episode, I know this is for the viewers who don't know who Popeye is. In every episode, he would get to this place where Bluto was either beating him up, taking his girl, or something. The world was on top of him, Popeye, versus him being on top of the world. And he would say this one phrase. He would say, I've had all I can stand. I can't stand no more. And then he will pull out this spinach. This was a way for people to start to like spinach. He would pull out this spinach. I don't know where he pulled it out from because his shirt was skin tight. I don't know where he would just pull out this can of spinach and bust it open with his hand. And so that begs the question, did you really need this spinach? Because you could just break a can of spinach open with your bare hands. He would eat the spinach and get strong and then overpower. He became like Samson and just overpowered Bluto, who's this big hulking guy, and get his girl back, right the wrongs, and everything would be good, right? So this guy, Mike Murdoch, what's your Popeye moment? What's your moment when you're like, you know what, I can't take it no more. I'm about to just turn my circumstances around. And he was like, you'll know what your Popeye moment is if you figure out what it is that you hate.
Mm-hmm.
He was like, that's connected to your passion. Like, it's not, it's taking it on its ear. Passion isn't always about what it is that you love. When it comes to genius, it's about what is it that you hate. And you may say, well, and I ask kids that because kids always tell you what they hate.
Mm-hmm.
I have an example about that you'll appreciate as a teacher. But the reason why this is game changing and it's really true, I believe, is because the world is broken. Would you agree?
I agree.
Like, even we talking about fish being in trees. It's like, that's not normal. Like, that's not what you're supposed to see. If I open up the window right now, Tina, and I see trees full of fish, it's time for me to get off the planet. I know you're saying limitless, but something like I'm getting off the planet because we know that fish don't belong in trees. They belong in water. And so the brokenness that's in the world is because of sin. And the scriptures say that God hates wickedness. He doesn't hate, and I tell kids, like, don't tell me who you hate, tell me what you hate, right? And there's a brokenness that affects and afflicts each of us personally. A lot of times we're exposed to it as children, right? And whatever that thing is, whenever we're exposed to it, it impacts us in such a negative way that when we see it as we get older, we're like, ooh, I hate that. I hate seeing that, right? It's not just affecting me now or my loved ones. It's affecting people who I don't know, and I hate to see it operate. And somebody should do something about it. And Tina, if you keep talking about this, every time you talk to your husband or you talk to your friends and they see that thing, they're like, oh, don't let Tina see that because she's gonna go off. Don't let her see it. Everybody has this one thing that when you see, you're like, And if you keep finding yourself saying somebody should do something about that, that somebody is you.
Yeah.
Because God has grieved, he sees the world in this dysfunction, and it breaks his heart and it grieves his heart. And he put us on the planet and said, I'm gonna grieve your heart, each of you, in a way that grieves my heart, unique to you, so that you do something about it. And that becomes the thing that you hate.
That's so good. That's so true, because going back to my example, I love teaching. But I hated seeing my students graduate and not do anything with their lives.
Yeah.
I hated the way the system was. There was so much I hated about my career, but that love for teaching never left.
Yeah, see, and thank you for, it's two sides of the same coin, right? Because, for example, I love hip hop, but I hate how it's being used right now. I hate how destructive it is right now, because I love that I'm a wordsmith. I love creating things with words. And I love it when I see that happening in a constructive way. I love it when I see the beauty of it. But I hate the platform could do so much and it's doing so little right now. And I hate it. It's that love-hate relationship. And so I completely get that. Like, yeah, this thing that you tend to hate is going to have, there's going to be a part of it that you love. So I get, that's why I said you're going to get this example that I give you in a minute. But yeah, I was going to ask you, and you already kind of got ahead of me, and that's good. Like, what is it that you hate? So you defined it already. You hate seeing, children, youth not reaching. It sounds like not reaching their full potential.
Right.
Because you've been talking about limits this whole time. Like, man, I don't like this. We serve a limitless God. Why we have limits? Why we putting limits on ourselves and on people around us? So I have an example for you. You ready?
Okay, I'm ready.
All right. You may get riled up with this though. Hearing what you hate. I hate this too. So I had a friend who's a principal, and she had these 10 little boys, these 10 little minority boys. And she was like, hey, can you come in and just spend some time with them for, like, the school year? So I said, bet. I went in every Friday and I talked with them, and I was like, man, I got to come up with content for these guys though. So I was, the Genius is Common thing was already in my repertoire. So I'm like, I'm going to talk to these boys about how they're geniuses. And so, they were third, fourth, and fifth graders all in one class for the whole day. We would have called it special ed back in the day. They were on an IEP, an individual plan. And so they had all these negative affirmations put on them that they had begun to accept. ADD, ADHD, disruptive, everything, right? So they're all in this one class. So I come in, and the first thing, one of the first things I say to them, I'm like, you're a genius. Each of you is a genius. And they looked at me like, not being comfortable with positive affirmations. They looked at me like I had like just cursed them out. It was like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you know who you're talking to, sir. It was like,
Mm-hmm.
you're in the wrong classroom, because that's not, don't call me that. I think one of them said that, don't call me that. And I'm like, wow, okay. But then in the same breath, they was roasting one another, and they thought that was hilarious. They were more comfortable with negative words being spoken over their lives than positive ones. So that was like obviously one big issue. But I went to my next go-to, which I knew I could get them to talk, and I said, tell me what you hate though. And Tina, knowing if you could ask that fish what it hated, like it will probably tell you that it hated the tree, because the tree and whoever it is that was telling it, you need to climb this tree. And if you don't climb it, you're dumb. Like it began to get this idea that it was dumb because there's a system that it's being thrust into that makes it try to function in a way that it's not meant to. And so what system is it that you think all these boys told me that they hated? These boys that can never agree on anything. They couldn't agree on what to play, when to play. But when I asked them what they hated, all of them told me the same thing. What system do you think they told me?
Oh my goodness. I would say they either hated school.
Yep. It was like school. We hate school, Mr. Key. Now what? They thought they had wrecked my whole workshop. They was looking at me like, and the teachers in the background like starting to sweat. Like, what is this guy? Who do we let come into this to this classroom that he's giving them the voice to say that they hate school? We can't let them say that. But I'm like, no. I said, I completely understand why you hate school. I mean, it's making you feel like a fish out of water every day that you come up in here. Why wouldn't you hate it? And I'm like, let me tell y'all something though, because I had already told them the thing that you hate is the thing that you're meant to ultimately address and fix. And so I said, if you hear me, what I said, that the thing that you hate is the thing that you're supposed to fix, then you telling me that you hate school lets me know that each of you are future educators. And it was like, oh, you started backing up. I'm like, no, why are you backing away though? Like y'all was all rah-rah a second ago, now you quiet. And I explained further. I said, look, school, there are 8 different learning styles. At most, schools are teaching from 3. From audible, auditory, visual, and from a left brain or a logical perspective. So guess what? Like you're gonna have a problem if you're creative, you're a right brain thinker. You're gonna have a problem if you're kinesthetic. You gotta move. Hey, they're moving around, sit down, stop moving, be still. If you're exploratory or expeditionary, meaning you got to touch things with your hands to understand, and they're telling you keep your hands to yourself. They're not allowing you to manifest this learning style that you have, and so you're going to feel like the information that you're receiving is literally being spoken in another language, and you're not going to get it, and you're going to feel stupid. You're going to feel like you don't belong. But I told them, like, if instead of running away from this system that you hate, you ran towards it with what you have on the inside of you and became a teacher, now your learning style becomes your teaching style, and you're going to reach other people that have the same learning style as you that are feeling out of place. And I was like, as educators, as teachers, you're now fixing the broken system of the school.
That's good.
And I'm like, but right now, the solution to the broken, because I talked to many teachers afterwards, and they're like, you're right, though. The school system is broken. Nobody disagrees with me. They just got scared when I talked about what you hate. But by the time I got to that point, they're like, yeah, the school system is broken. Why is it broken? Because it keeps marginalizing the future solution and making it feel like it doesn't belong.
Yeah.
And so that's the power of like identifying what it is that you hate and then arming yourself to, my battery about to run out.
Oh, that's not good.
I thought I had my battery, it's over here. No, yeah, here it is. All right, I'm good. I'm safe. I had plugged it up. I just forgot to connect it. All right. So you clearly, like as a teacher, how do you feel about that?
I totally agree. And that was one of the things I had the privilege of, before actually getting my own classroom, I had the privilege to observe and hear from a lot of students before I actually taught. And so, and I taught in a very, very tough school district, Title I school, lots of kids in poverty, the mindset. I literally remember having days, and I would probably be fired for it, but I remember having days where we just had to sit down and talk real life stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like
I
we
forget
had
the
days,
curriculum.
right? Let's talk about real life. Like here I have students where we're reading a story and the word supermarket comes up and you don't know what a supermarket is.
Man.
Or I'm trying to build schema and help you, visualize what it's like to be on an airplane so you can relate to this character in the story, but you've never been on a plane.
Yeah.
And once I realized that, I realized my way of teaching had to be different. So then we did point of view kickball.
Nice.
That's how we learned point of view. We did making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. You had to write a recipe in a certain way, and then they had to follow it. That's how we learned that skill. We did relay races for plot, character, conflict, theme, setting. And that's how I had to connect with these kids. I couldn't stand up in front of them in lecture because they weren't gonna get it that way.
Nope.
But so many, and I hate to say this, but a lot of teachers never realize that.
There are assumptions that they make that makes the execution of their job easy, but it alienates at the same time.
Yeah. Behavior problems. I knew if I had a behavior problem in my class, it was because the student was acting out because either one, they were bored, or two, they didn't think they had what it took to answer the questions that we were going over. They didn't want to come up to the front of the classroom to share. So when I noticed the trends of my students and what they were comfortable with and what they were not comfortable with, I was able to build on that, play on that, and help build their confidence, even if I had to give them the stuff a day early and go with them.
Yeah.
But how many teachers do that? It's hard. It's not easy. You got 30 kids in the classroom you're trying to cater to, and they're all on different levels. They all have different learning styles, but you have to change it up.
Yeah.
And you have to do what you can to reach them.
Can you imagine if the school system actually took a moment to say, how can we recalibrate and made room for these different learning styles to be teaching styles? And then like within a grade level, you split up the students so that instead of 30 people in one class, you maybe had 5 to 10, and they were matched with the teaching style that their learning style is in. That would be game changing.
Listen, education would be on a different level.
Different level.
Different level.
And this example is an easy example because it's very clear how this works. But this is happening in every industry. Any industry that involves people is doing the same thing. It's structured a certain way so that certain people thrive in it. Everybody else feels alienated, but everybody's beginning to hate, like, the structure of this is making me feel like I don't belong and I hate it. And if people understood that they're literally facing their Goliath as David, there's some things which start to change. Because when you tap into what it is, when this passion, because you think of the phrase, I hate that with a passion. When you tap into what this passion is from a hate perspective, then you'll be so driven to get at this thing. You won't care what they're paying you. You won't care how small or big your impact is perceived to be. You will get at it. And you'll be like, every time I see this thing, like, just like David, like, oh, what you saying about the God that I serve? Oh yeah, give me my slingshot and 5 smooth stones. That's all I need. And the important thing is, if you remember that story, at one point, they were going to put King Saul's armor on David. And David was like, no, this don't fit me. This is not my element. You about to have me die like the rest of y'all think y'all going to do. He said, give me my slingshot though. I've done some things with this slingshot. I've killed some lions with this slingshot. Give me that though. And so that gets us to the next component, which is the talent. Because if we're talking about brokenness, then the thing that we need to address brokenness is a tool.
Mm-hmm.
And our talent is our tool to address the brokenness that we hate.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So basically, he was like, give me this slingshot. I know how to work this. And so, the question or the statement becomes, it is a question. What is it in your hand? That's what he asked Moses. And Moses was like, hey, God, I can't, I'm not trying to, I'm calling back what you said, just to let you know I'm paying attention and I'm listening. But when he told you that you were going to be an obedience coach, and you was like, I don't even, what is that? Like, I don't, and you started kind of giving some feedback to God, like, yeah, that don't sound like that's the right thing for me. Moses did the same thing, right? Hey, I want you to
Right.
go, let my people go. He was like, you know I stutter, right? You know I'm not an eloquent speaker, right? He was like, dude, like, first of all, I made your mouth. And he's like, second of all, like, you
That
got your
part.
brother, right? Aaron's right next to you. Then Moses stopped,
Mm-hmm.
he was like, he's still complaining. So what did God say to him? He said, dude, what is in your hand? He's like, I just got this raggedy staff. He was like, man, throw that joker on the ground. Turn into a snake. Pick the snake up by his tail, turn back into a staff. He was like, now go let my people go. You see what I just did, what was in your hand? You straight.
Mm-hmm.
Go do what I've go be obedient to what I've asked you to do. And so our talent is that thing like that we overlook often because they're like, oh, it's just
Mm-hmm.
X, Y, and Z. It's nothing major. He's like, no, that is major. And I encounter a lot of youth and some adults who will say, I don't have a talent. And I'm like, no, yeah, you do. All you got to really do is look towards your predecessors, the people who came before you, because the
Mm-hmm.
talent is generational.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, it didn't just pop up in you. It's been handed down from generation to generation. And people, we recognize what that looks like, Tina, because we see it in athletes,
Right.
we see it in entertainers, but we don't see it in ourselves. We'll see a family entertainer. You're like, that makes sense. Bronny about to come out into the NBA next year. That makes sense. He got his father's LeBron James, but then we'll overlook the thing that our parents and our grandparents and our great grandparents were doing for several different reasons that I won't get into right now. And we were like, well, I don't have anything. Yes, you do. And so
Right.
that talent is already there. So what would you say your talent is, Tina?
That word has really evolved with me because I used to think about talent as being, athletic or able to sing or able to dance. But I realized helping people is my talent. I'm
Yeah.
able to help people. And I come from a family of helpers. I do. Um, and so when I look back on what I'm currently doing, I'm like, God, if I could just sit down and just trust you, that's it.
Yeah. That's what a coach is, right? You said that he told you that you're going to be an obedience coach. A coach is someone who helps them get to the next level of whatever it is that they're going after. And many times a coach, there are life coaches who are one-on-one, but many times, and I see this for you, coaches are coordinating a group of people to move towards a common goal, a group of people with different talents that aren't being pushed to the side. You're not going to ask a quarterback to be a center.
Right.
Like, no, that doesn't make any sense. You're going to let the quarterback do what he does while the center does what he does and know that cohesively they're going to become a unit that there's nothing missing, nothing broken. And I see that for you. I don't know if you're doing obedience coaching one-on-one, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it one-on-one, but when you begin to have people be obedient in a group, and then this is how genius works. Genius understands like, hey, I got zeros and nines. One of my guys has said this, and I keep saying, I got zeros and nines. Genius doesn't mean that you're good at everything.
Right.
You know what your lane is, what your element is. You're like, this is where I am. This is where I excel. And I need you to excel where you are. And it recognizes and appreciates other genius so that things can come together. We're going back to the body of Christ and the many members, one body, so that the overall goal can be achieved. So I see you moving groups of people towards a common goal line to accomplish a specific feat and to be successful as a unit with what it is that you're doing.
That's good.
You speak to that because many times what it is when the Father reveals this type of thing is the person is already operating in it, and they just either they're just developing it or they're like, man, I hadn't really done that in a while, and it's like go back to that. So can you speak to that? Like, is that something that you're doing?
It's definitely happening. It's happening. Because right now I have a group of women. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. I think it's 5 women. And every time we meet, it's amazing. Everybody feeds off of each other. Everybody helps each other. One person may ask this question and I just let them go. Like sometimes I don't even have to say anything. We build each other. Including me. I get what I need to. So yeah, I definitely see that because it's definitely happening.
It's happening already. See,
It's
you
happening.
already operating in this. I knew you were. I knew you were. And it wasn't even, I'm gonna ask you about the business that brought me to you and introduced us to one another. And I knew from that there was some genius about you. But there's something else that you just described altogether that I knew nothing about. And so I'm glad that you brought that to light. Now, does that group, is there a name for this group of women?
Obedience leads to prosperity.
But just the obedience leads to prosperity. I don't mean to say just like, but it's the obedience leads to prosperity.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Now, just to finish, I'm gonna finish off this genius equation because the last part is really easy, and then I want to ask you to talk about the other businesses that you have. So let me just get this out the way. Very simply, purpose, and I'm not going to go to Rick Warren route and talk about purpose-driven life, though it does drive your life to understand this genius. But purpose is simple. The purpose is to identify your talent, your God-given talent, recognize it as a tool, and then apply that to the thing that's broken, which is described as your passion within this equation. And when you walk through those three components, you unlock your genius. And so genius is self-affirming first. It's like when you have children, right?
I have a bonus thing.
You have a bonus? All right. So you understand this. Have you ever gone, you talked about, getting on the airplane and you have some kids who have never gotten on the airplane before. But if you were on the airplane with your bonus, right? What do they tell you to do? If we start breaking out and these air masks come down, don't put the mask on your child first, because you're gonna end up passing out and then both y'all gonna die. You gotta put it on you first before you put it on somebody else. And that's how this genius is. You have to self-affirm, and it's not Kanye, it's self-affirmation. It's humility. It's humility. We often think of the pendulum on one side of humility, which says don't think too highly of yourself. But the other perspective of meekness is don't think too lowly of yourself either, which is what you said at the very beginning, because you were saying, I'm made in the image and likeness of God, though. So rise to the occasion, right?
Right.
Once you self-affirm who you are, then you can begin to affirm others. Your genius affirms you so that you can affirm others. That's how it works. And so, yeah, I'm happy to hear that you're walking in that with being an obedience coach. But can you also tell me, like, what is the business that you also have, the other business that you do?
Well, my business name is T3 Creations and More. It started with me watching a YouTube video, making some wreaths. So when I first started, all I made were wreaths for the doors.
Oh, really?
And yeah, that's all I would make. And so my original name was actually the Wreath Ministry. And so God told me every wreath that I made, I had to pray over. And this was a step in me getting to where I am now, because I didn't have a problem praying over it. But then when I had to actually speak to the person and tell them what I prayed, that's when it got complicated for me, because I was like, God, you know, I don't talk to people. Right. And so from there, I started, getting into other items. And so there came the tumblers and the t-shirts and the porch signs and the pillows. And I was just like, wow, because never in a million years would I thought that I could make any of this, because I never thought I was creative.
Yeah.
And so God has really expanded my business to the products and now services, the obedience coaching. I have some courses that are coming out now. I'm an author, and I'm getting ready to launch a publishing company.
Oh man, I didn't know.
And I'm getting ready to launch my first picture book. So yeah, my business has definitely expanded ever since I got my yes and left my job and walked in obedience and stood on faith. Yeah.
It'll put you into, and I realize now in life that God gives us several Abraham moments where he says, like, hey, separate from your kin and go to a place that I will show you. Like, you're not going to show me where? I'm like, no, because it wouldn't require any faith at all.
At all.
I appreciate your story, because that's I'm in the same type of vein. And it's, even as you have all of these different, I just see this overlapping and obvious theme, even as I was telling you that, you know, you're going to get a group of people to go towards a group of, you say women. So a group of women to go toward a common goal and achieve it. Even as you have this different merchandise, but it's all geared towards, because, you know, I know you bless everything and you put a scripture on everything, and it's prophetic is what it is. It's speaking edification, exhortation, and comfort to people, and not just speaking at once, but, you know, people need records of things. And so as you have these products, you know, I see somebody, you know, having your products all throughout their house and having these different affirmations that are scriptural, that are like, oh, okay, yeah, I am fearfully and wonderfully made, and having these different reminders, because sad to say, we do need reminders often, because we tend to kind of default back to this lesser than mentality, or some of us tend to go to the greater than mentality. We need to be somewhere right in the middle. And so I see that your line of products is something that helps people to kind of find that balance. And so I'm very appreciative and thankful, one, for you coming on to the show and talking to me for a little bit, and two, for the work that you're doing, that's going to help build up and lift up God's people into a place where they would let their light shine, so that they would glorify their Father in heaven. So thank you, Tina.
I have to thank you, because that was so much confirmation. I went to a retreat last weekend, and I'll end with this. I went to a retreat last weekend, and we did a little activity where we had to cross the Red Sea. And one of the things I saw when we were doing the activity was, it was just like a gold city that was very luxurious, and I just saw souls going to heaven.
Okay.
And on the other side of the Red Sea, I saw so many people, men and women, that were looking so helpless, waiting for me. And by the end of that activity, I was just a wreck. I was messed up. I was in tears. But I realized that obedience is not an option for me. Doing what I'm doing right now is not an option, because I went on Indeed and I was looking for jobs, and I was getting ready to go back into the classroom. But I was like, no, I can't do that, because God has called me to do this for a reason. And so thank you for that confirmation.
Absolutely. I mean, this is a prophetic exercise, is what it is. And I love seeing and hearing what God has for people, and catching a glimpse of it by just walking through my obedience to this genius equation. It happens over and over again. I love it. So yeah, we're pretty much at the end of the interview. I want to thank you again for taking the time. This has been Manu Forti Ministries presents Common Genius, Uncommon Destiny. I am your host, motivational speaker, author, and publisher, Reggie Key. And this has been my genius guest, Tina Pearson. And Tina, it's my uncommon cue to see the genius in you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us for this week's episode. Make sure you pick up the book, Common Genius, Uncommon Destiny, by my dad, Reggie Legend, available on Amazon and at inkwellspoken.com. Connect with us at inkwellspoken on all social media platforms. If you enjoy our content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload.